Hey, welcome. We're going to dive into a new law in England that honestly sounds almost impossible. The idea that new construction could be forced to actually improve the natural world. It's called biodiversity net gain, or BNG, and it is surrounded by myths. So let's separate the facts from the fiction.
So let's just start with that big question. We usually think of bulldozers and wildlife as, total opposites. But what if every single new building, every housing development, had to leave nature in a better state than it was before? It sounds like a bit of a fantasy, right? Well, it's not a fantasy anymore. As of 2024, it is the law. And that one simple fact makes understanding BNG absolutely essential for pretty much anyone involved in planning, development, or conservation in England. Okay, so what does this new law actually mean? What is it asking people to do? Let's break down the basics. At its heart, BNG is a huge shift in how we think. It's not enough for developers to just, try to avoid damaging things anymore. Now, they have a legal duty to leave the environment in a measurably better condition than they found it. We've moved past just preservation and into active, required improvement. And here is the magic number, 10%. The law demands a minimum 10% net gain in what's called biodiversity value. And this isn't just some vague goal. It's a hard number that gets crunched using a special government tool. Think of it like a nature calculator. It measures the habitat value before and after, and that final score has to show at least a 10% boost. And if you're thinking this is something to worry about down the line, well, it's already here. The groundwork was laid back in 2021, but 2024 was the big year. In February, it became mandatory for major developments, and just a couple of months later, in April, it rolled out to small sites too. This is happening right now. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the rules of the game. This is where so much of the confusion and the myths really come from. We're going to tackle some of the biggest ones, starting with a really common worry about how people could try to game the system. So here's the first big myth, and it's a huge fear. What's to stop a developer from just, bulldozing a beautiful wildflower meadow before the official survey to get a really low starting score? Well, the law basically has a time machine. The local planning authority can just ignore what the site looks like now and reset the clock, setting the baseline to what it was back on January 30th, 2020. So trying to cheat, it's a really, really risky and potentially expensive game to play. So how do developers actually hit that 10% target? They have to follow this strict ladder of options. The number one priority is always to avoid damage and improve what's already there. If that isn't enough, step 2 is creating new habitats on the development site itself. Only then can they start looking off-site, first by buying these things called units from other landowners. And way down at the bottom, the absolute last resort is buying credits from the government. Now, this is a really important difference that trips a lot of people up. Units versus credits. So biodiversity units are part of a brand new open market. A farmer, for example, could create a new wetland, get it officially registered, and then sell the units of biodiversity gain to a developer who needs them. Statutory biodiversity credits, on the other hand, are sold by the government itself, and they are intentionally designed to be the expensive, painful last-ditch option. And here's exactly why they're the last resort. Just look at these prices. They are absolutely staggering. The government set them sky high on purpose to push developers towards finding solutions on the open market. A single credit for a common habitat might cost you £42,000, and for something more sensitive, like a river, a jaw-dropping £230,000. The message couldn't be clearer. Find a market solution, or you are going to pay a massive price. Okay, so we've got the rules down. Now let's see how this stuff actually applies in the real world by tackling a few more common myths. A huge myth out there is that BNG is going to stop us from redeveloping old industrial sites or brownfield land. But actually, the reality is often the complete opposite. A lot of these sites have a really low biodiversity score to begin with, which means hitting that 10% gain can be super simple. And even for those rare brownfield sites that have become havens for wildlife, the off-site market we just talked about provides a perfectly good solution. Okay, here's a surprising one for you. What about all the back gardens in a new housing estate? Do they actually count toward BNG? And the answer is yes, they do. Now, obviously, you can't legally force a homeowner to maintain a wildflower patch for the next 30 years. But the potential habitat created by all those gardens is still factored into the developer's calculation right at the start. It's a pretty clever way to incentivize greener housing designs.
So, what about buying those off-site units? A lot of people think you have to buy them from right there in your local area. And while that's definitely preferred, it's not actually a legal requirement. A developer down in Cornwall could technically buy units from a landowner way up in Northumberland. But, and this is a big but, the nature calculator applies a penalty the further away you go. It's called a spatial risk multiplier, and it creates a really strong financial push to keep the environmental gains as local as possible.
So far, we've been focused on how BNG works for individual projects. But now let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. How does this all connect to the much larger national ambition to help nature recover? This quote right here from the really important Lawton report, it just captures the whole philosophy. For years, the goal has been to create wildlife habitats that aren't just little isolated islands, but are larger, healthier, and, crucially, are connected to each other. BNG is designed to be a major tool to actually help make that vision a reality.
And here's how it gets really strategic. All across England, local councils are drawing up what are essentially nature recovery maps that pinpoint the best places to restore habitats. BNG is built to plug right into this system. If a landowner creates a new habitat in one of these priority zones, the nature calculator actually gives them bonus units. It creates this powerful financial incentive for developers to fund projects that are part of a much bigger, more intelligent, joined-up plan for nature. Now, something that's really critical to get is that making this system work isn't just one person's job. BNG is truly a team sport. It requires ecologists doing the surveys, landscape architects designing the green spaces, planners, lawyers sorting out the legal agreements, and landowners providing those off-site habitats. Everybody has a massive role to play here.
So, with all of that in mind, let's finish up with a clear, simple playbook. What's the best advice for developers, landowners, and local councils to get BNG right? If there's one golden rule for all of this, it is simply this: plan early. For developers, that means thinking about BNG before you even buy the land. For landowners who want to sell units, it means get your site registered and ready now to give developers confidence. And for the local planning authorities, it means building BNG into your big picture plans for where development should go. Proactive planning changes everything. So the biggest thing to take away from all this is that biodiversity net gain is not a passing trend. It's not a nice to have. It is now a permanent, mandatory part of building anything in England. And the key to making it work isn't some secret formula. It's just planning early and working together. There is no question that BNG is a radical new approach. The system is here, the rules are in place, and it's one of the most ambitious environmental planning policies anywhere in the world. But it does leave us with one huge lingering question. Will a mandatory 10% gain be enough to truly reverse decades of decline and turn the tide for nature? The answer to that is going to shape the English countryside for generations. Thanks for tuning in.